Joining us, MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, Midas Touch Chief Washington correspondent Scott MacFarlane is with us as well. So, Lisa, one of the questions I have just right off the top is, what is the difference between the DOJ putting it in writing themselves in the filing and attaching the transcript of Todd Blanche? After all, he was under oath in that congressional testimony.
Well, first of all, putting it in a sworn filing has different consequences if you then act differently than what you've said you're going to do than a court filing or even congressional testimony. If you testify to Congress falsely, you can be prosecuted for that. But of course, the person who would prosecute you is the same body that here won't send its acting attorney general to make that representation. In terms of putting it in a court filing, if you do something in a court filing that's in bad faith, a court can impose certain consequences on you, but they really don't go beyond monetary sanctions. And of course, the Department of Justice knows both of these things, which is why they won't do what the judge requested, which is put it in writing in something that is more consequential, more significant, a sworn declaration. Because if, for example, a lawyer for the department or a political principal were to lie in a sworn declaration, the consequences for that could include criminal contempt imposed by the judge herself. And that's different in degrees different. But I'll also submit to you, Katie, that this has to do with Todd Blanche's confirmation hearing, too, right? There is a deadline for the court saying July 17th would be the deadline for DOJ to put in a filing if this case doesn't go away. Todd Blanche's confirmation hearing is July 15th and 16th. It's almost as if they don't want a conclusive answer at the time he appears before Senate Judiciary.
I'm going to ask you just kind of a, maybe it's a dumb question. Todd Blanche, in speaking to members of Congress, he's not automatic. I was just told he was not under oath. But if you're talking to members of Congress in a hearing setting, aren't you also not allowed to lie?
You're not supposed to lie, but the consequences for lying to Congress, whether or not you're under oath, are a federal statute. And the only people who enforce that federal statute, they're not Congress. It's the DOJ. Department of Justice itself.
All right. So the question I had earlier, and Scott, I think you're going to have a better sense of it because this is the body you cover, is how Republicans are going to react to this. Are they still going to be content to take Todd Blanche's word for it?
Oh, boy, Todd Blanche has got a problem on his hands here. Thom Tillis, the pivotal vote on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Katie, says he's got a slush fund issue with Todd Blanche right now. He doesn't want the slush fund moving forward. This kind of equivocation, this kind of sleight of hand with the court is going to concern Senator Tillis, and that endangers Todd Blanche's road forward at the aforementioned mid-July confirmation hearings. I'm told, Katie, Blanche and Tillis meet early next week, so they're going to be able to hash this out. I want to emphasize, though, that Judge Lonnie Brinkema in the Eastern District of Virginia, she wanted this thing in writing for a reason. I'm not sure she's going to accept this 5-page argument from the Trump administration that it's unnecessary and has a separation of powers issue. I don't think the judge agrees. And just for the record, Katie and Lisa, I read through that transcript they submitted to the court today. No better way to spend a Friday in the summer than reading a House transcript. Todd Blanche used the phrase, the slush fund's not moving forward, 10 times, always precisely wording it that way. That is all kinds of sus.
Why?
Well, you could have used different phrases. You could have used different terms. You could have said you're halting it. You could have said it's never going to happen. You could have said it's over. Not moving forward is just the type of passive voice that gives them room for error, room to maneuver, I should say. And I think the court filing does the same today.
Can I put a finer point on that for a second? The settlement agreement that obligated the Attorney General to set up the anti-weaponization fund is a document that Todd Blanche says is still valid and that he refused to rescind. So when he says we're not moving forward with the anti-weaponization fund, he's not denying that he still has what the Department of Justice itself has said is a legal obligation to establish it. It gives it the room to go back and do it, and not only do it, but say that they have committed themselves to doing it in that settlement agreement with President Trump in the Trump versus IRS case.
Let's bring in Washington or MSNL contributor and senior writer for the Dispatch, David Drucker, as well to the conversation. David, thanks for joining us on this. The president has been pretty clear that he thinks the weaponization fund is worthy. He calls it a good idea. He says some Republicans also think it's a good idea. How much of this has to do with the president just still wanting it to happen?
I think that's Everything, actually. And I think what we learned about President Trump over the years is that, when he runs into a problem or when he wants to communicate things, he'll tell the people around him, listen, I just need the press release. I just need a headline. Don't worry about the facts. We'll deal with that later. We saw a lot of this during the run up to January 6, 2001, when he was searching and his team was searching in vain, ultimately, for proof of voter fraud that would have invalidated the 2020 election, so-called from his point of view. And when members of his team would come to him and say, listen, we're not finding anything there, he'd say, it doesn't have to really be anything. I just need the headline. I'll take it from there. And, repeatedly they would go into court. And this is relevant here, right? Because we're talking about what are you willing to tell a judge? What are you willing to put your name on in court? They never had the goods in court, which told us that they didn't have anything that they claimed they had. And so here with this anti-weaponization so-called fund, the president has never disavowed it himself. He's never actually said himself, in retrospect, I realized that Republicans in the U.S. Senate don't like this. And so I've shelved it. It's done. I still like it, but I've killed it. I understand that people don't like it. His language has always remained positive. He's claimed Republicans like it. In fact, we really can't find any Republicans on the Hill, at least not in the Senate, where it ran into deep trouble, that like it. And I think that's why this is so key here, because I think the president wants to leave his options open. He said as much.
Yeah. Let me also bring into the conversation some reporting from the Wall Street Journal. You just mentioned that Donald Trump just wants a headline and then he can take care of the rest. This kind of dovetails with that. According to the Post, President Trump has delivered the same retort to political allies who have offered him strategic advice in recent weeks, according to people with knowledge of the conversations, saying, quote, I'm the president and you're not. So with that as context, David, what does Donald Trump expect of somebody that he's nominating for a cabinet position, especially one as sensitive and useful to him as Attorney General?
Well, he expects him to do what he says, right? I mean, look, attorney generals are always accountable to presidents, right? I think we've made over the years maybe a little bit too much of this, independence of the Department of Justice, and the attorney general is supposed to act independently of political leadership. And that's not, from my vantage point, that's never been entirely true, because this is always going to land at the president's feet if the Department of Justice is not handling things properly or choosing not to prosecute things and things of that nature. But the president has treated the DOJ during this second term as really his personal law firm. And so the idea that Todd Blanche is not going to pursue something that the president demands, other than I suppose he could resign, but the way, Mr. Blanche has run the DOJ, and really while Pam Bondi was Attorney General, a lot of, people that really pay attention to the DOJ thought it was very instructive that Blanche was sort of the second in command, because he was the person that was really going to understand how things were supposed to operate here. So, I think we've seen repeatedly in hearings for all sorts of positions when Democrats will say, who won the 2020 election? And sometimes it sounds like a gotcha question. But, we've noticed that nobody will just say, yeah, Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Now, can we move on and talk about the things, that is why I'm here in the first place? Because they know that this is so important to the president. So my point being here, if the president really demands something, then I think we can expect Mr. Blanche to most likely pursue it. The only other option then would be that he would resign and the president would go looking for somebody who would pursue this particular issue.
And he clearly wants not just his AGs, but his AG pick and other cabinet officials, but he wants Republicans in Congress, Scott, to do what he says as well. We're going to talk about this more, but he has been pushing the Save America Act. He's trying to force Republicans to pass it, even though John Thune has been pretty clear that he does not have the votes. The expectation from him is high because he's gotten his way on everything else. I guess for anybody who is looking at Thune and saying Thune's dug in and these other Republicans are dug in on Save America Act and questioning that, being skeptical of that, is it safe to be skeptical of that, given all that we've seen in the lead up to this moment?
Safe. It's super safe. It's booster seat in the back of your car safe to assume that, Katie. John Thune, does not have votes for the Save America Act, does not have votes to kill the filibuster, does not have anybody who declaratively says this slush fund's a good idea. And every day the memorandum of understanding looms. Every day we get closer to the election, those numbers actually dwindle.